And I understand, yes, obviously, we're all more familiar with our people's roster, right? Like when I talk about a guy like Mitchell Melton, right? Okay. Obviously, I don't know the Mitchell Melton on your team. You don't know the Mitchell Melton on our team. I just can't possibly imagine that your Mitchell Melton is our Mitchell Melton. And I think that our Mitchell Melton could start for your team. Is that biased? I don't know, man. Hey, it's Chuck. Let's get it. And welcome in. That is our buddy Jake Cook out of Westerville North. And Jake Cook is a lineman who absolutely wowed everybody at the Canton Under Armour camp with his physical transformation from his junior to his heading into his senior year. He's an absolute unit now. That's 6'4.5", 290. And as you can see, a nasty football player. So does not yet have an Ohio State offer. He's a Louisville commit. But give me a dude like that and a dude like Andrew Stargell any day to pair with a guy like Carter Lowe. And anybody else is just a bonus. But absolutely love when I see a dude really put in a ton of work. He was kind of flabby. He lost a ton of weight. Absolutely must be crushing it in the gym. So, Louisville commit. Could the Bucks? He's definitely on the radar. He definitely put himself on the radar with that camp. There's no doubt about it. We heard that from Bill Kurlick. We heard that from Berm. Like he's definitely. I think we heard it from Berm. I know we heard it from Kurlick. He put himself on the radar. I'd absolutely love to see the Bucks go after this guy. As of yet, does not have an offer. So we'll see what happens. But definitely someone I would love to see in the class. So we got a big show today. We got the huge game going on in Oregon. And I wanted to kind of do a breakdown of the position group by position group battle between the Ducks and the Bucks. So, I started off and we're going to do it all. And we can see all the block O's, as you can see. Like we did very well in this competition. What Oregon fans, we got some. What do you call your O? We call ours the block O. What is yours? The oblong O? I don't know. What do you call your O? It's really a strange O. It's symmetrical in the middle and asymmetrical on the outside. Is it? Yeah, it's asymmetrical on the outside. But what I really wanted to talk about to start today was this game against Oregon with the Buckeyes. I think it's a really massive game. And I kind of would like to hear a little feedback from the Oregon folks here, but I feel like this game is kind of like a measuring stick for them as a program, as they have been trying for so long to kind of ascend into the very top tier of college football. And everywhere we turn now in recruiting, they're right there. That's a new development. That wasn't a thing ever before. They've been there on some guys. They're there on everybody. And we'll hit on that more later on because, Steve Wiltfong is really irritating me. And I'm kind of developing a theory here that ever since he moved to On3, he's trying to generate more attention to On3 by maybe making a little mountains out of molehills. We'll put it that way. But we'll get to that later. But I feel like Oregon is, they got the right guy for the job that knows how to do what he's doing, which is recruit the best guys in the country with the advantages that they have now with both the rules and the money to, I don't want to say exploit. That's not really the right word. Utilize the money to the best of the ability of their ability, right? So he's doing a great job, and it's legal now, and he's doing exactly what we would want him to do if we were Oregon fans. And it's been effective. Their disadvantage geographically has held them back forever. They've scratched and clawed, lost coaches, got another one, invested heavily in the program, lost the coach. And this has kind of been what they've always done. And when they've been at their best, even then, they had talent and a lot of talent, but not the same level of talent when you look at their 2 national championship games that they made it to. They still had to scheme their way into those positions. And they barely lost to Auburn under Chip. That Auburn team was not the most talented Auburn team, but I don't think anybody was beating Cam Newton that year. But those teams, they weren't equipped to line up and just beat you. They had to scheme a little bit to get around you. The Marcus Mariota team that the Buckeyes beat, that team had a lot of NFL players, nowhere near the amount the Buckeyes did, and they kind of had to scheme their way to get there. They don't need to do that anymore. They now have the talent to punch you in the mouth and play the same ball, and we're going to see that when we go over. We're going to go over the rosters today. We went over all the rosters, and we're going to pull it up, and we're going to go group by group and talk about these guys. Buckeyes versus Ducks, the roster. And it was fun. It was a fun exercise going through this. So we'll go through it together. So this game is kind of like a measuring stick, I feel. I feel like it's a measuring stick for the Ducks program as to how far they've come. And I don't mean to take anything away from the fact that they came into Columbus and beat Ohio State, but we know that was a historically bad defense, number one. C.J. Stroud's third start very early in the season, and I kind of feel like the Buckeyes got caught with their pants down. They weren't expecting what came that day. Oregon's not sneaking up on anybody anymore. This game is the most hyped game in, I don't know, the first half of the season. I feel like it is. I don't feel like what are the other massive games early on? Texas and Michigan's a very big one, but I don't think it's as big as this. USC, LSU, no. There's several. It's definitely not Georgia and Clemson. By the way, Texas A&M hosts Notre Dame. Who do you think's favored in that game? Obviously Notre Dame, right? No. Texas A&M is favored in Mike Elko's first year against Notre Dame by 1.5. That kind of surprised me. Way off subject. We'll talk about some big early games later, but I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I haven't heard this offseason, just on a national level, of anybody being as excited for a game in the first half of the season more than the Ohio State-Oregon game. Everybody's pumped for this game. And I don't know where this game ranks in the history of the Oregon program during the regular season as far as hosting games at Autzen, but it feels to me like for a regular season game at Autzen Stadium, this has got to be like a top 10 game in the history of that stadium, right? We've got some Oregon fans now. I had 3 of them just comment on the last video. 2 of them really cool. 1 of them not so cool. But I'd love to hear what you guys think. Do you view this game as kind of a measuring stick for the program as you finally got your coach, a coach in Dan Lanning who is now committed to staying there? And I think he's proven that. The guy just turned down one of the best jobs in college football. And, and also Texas A&M, who some people also think is one of the best jobs in college football. I don't agree at all, but it certainly has the money and the passion and the support. But you've got all that at Oregon, and he's staying there. But House versus NCAA may be a hiccup to this plan because the new rules and the new enforcement arm and the true NIL could potentially throw a wrench in everything that's going on in the Oregon program in the next couple years. We'll see how much they're able to get around it. But we'll go over that later on. But let's talk about the game, though, because I really do believe that as the Ducks come into the Big Ten, their first Big Ten contest, coming in as the second odds-on favorite to win the conference, with a roster, with the transfer portal that is now, they stocked up on loads of talent. They sure did. Let's get right to the talent matchup. All right, so I'm going to pull up the rosters. We'll do The good guys on the left, the bad guys on the right. I think I'm backwards on how you're seeing it. All right, so let's start with the coaching matchup. We got Ryan Day. Ryan Day not been great in big games. We know that. He gets a lot of criticism for that. But he's got a new way of doing things as he's no longer calling plays. Also has a whole lot of experience on what not to do in big games. Very much accused of tightening up late, being way too conservative late, making poor decisions with clock management. I feel like he's had the opportunity to learn from all those failures. Has he? Is he going to prove that to everybody? I sure hope so. Dan Lanning also not been great in big games, kind of for the opposite reasons. The dude's incredibly aggressive. He lost to UW twice last year, and they were filled with super aggressive decisions that kind of cost him in the end. Too many? I'll tell you what, I'd rather go down swinging like Lanning did than going down being overly conservative. But both of those losses were 3-point games. Who's got the edge in coaching? I don't think that this is really close. Lanning he has a real knack for building a program and running a program, and maybe the best we've seen from a young guy in a long time. And he's picked up a lot of things faster than anybody anticipated. But when we're just talking about coaching, Ryan Day's got this hands down. I don't care what anybody says. It's just not, everybody in these coaching rankings, you get a hot young coach and all of a sudden they throw the dude in like top 5. No. Ryan Day is the far superior football coach. That's not even up for debate to me. I respect your opinion if you disagree, but I'm really firm in that one. Offensive coordinator. The Ducks know, right? They know who wins this one. Their fellow Mark Stein, also very good, but definitely not Will Stein, definitely not Chip Kelly. So big time advantage there. And as we get into the offense, we'll start with quarterback. So Dylan Gabriel, 14,000 yards in his career. This is going to be his 6th year starting a football game, 125 touchdowns, 25 picks. Whether you match him up against Will Howard or Devin Brown, whoever your guy is, he's not going to be better than Dylan Gabriel at this point in his career in game number 6 of this season. So the quarterback edge goes to the Ducks, and it's probably a pretty substantial edge. At running back, Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins for the Buckeyes, Jordan James and Jay Harris for the Ducks. If you're ranking those 4 guys, to me it goes Trey, Quinn, Jordan James, Jay Harris. So Buckeyes definitively win the running back battle. However, it's not because the Oregon running backs aren't good. It's because the Ohio State running backs are great. Those are really good backs over at Oregon too. Wide receiver, really tough one. Really, really good wide receiver crew in Oregon. Ohio State's looking like it's going to be J.J. Smith, Emeka Egbuka, and Carnell Tate. Carnell Tate could be wide receiver 1 at a ton of schools, no doubt about that. Emeka as well. J.J. Smith just might be the best player. Let's put it this way. I think that most people, even Ohio State haters, agree that at some point in his career, he will be the best wide receiver in the country. It's just a matter of how soon is that going to happen. Emeka is certainly a proven 1st or 2nd round pick already, and I think that's only going to get better. Over at Oregon, Evan Stewart, number 1 wide receiver out of the transfer portal from Texas A&M. Excellent. Top 5 wide receiver in the country. Tez Johnson for Oregon had over 1,000 yards last year with 10 touchdowns. Trayshawn Bolden, 500 yards with 6 touchdowns. This is a very proven room over at Oregon. J.J. Smith, not yet proven. Carnell Tate, not really yet proven. We think we know what he can do. Because Oregon's wide receiver room is more proven, it kicks him up a little notch. But if I'm ranking these guys, I'm going J.J. Smith, Evan Stewart, Emeka Egbuka, Tez Johnson, Carnell Tate, Trayshawn Holden, which gives Ohio State the win here. But it's close. I think it's closer than it's going to be by the time we see them in week 6. But these are two of the very best wide receiver rooms in the country. There's no doubt about it. I will also note that even though Brandon Inniss is unproven, I think by the time this game rolls around, he will be number 6 on that list. He's going to overtake Holden as that number 6 guy, which puts a little more of a gap between the Ohio State wide receivers and the Oregon wide receivers, and the Buckeyes win a little more comfortably in this battle. But Oregon's is legit. So we're talking a great quarterback and a great wide receiver room, very solid running back room. Offensive line, the Oregon tackles are amazing. Josh Conley Jr., Johnny Cornelius, potential first-round picks. They got solid guard play, a good center, all proven players. They win the line. The Buckeyes have a proven quality center. The Buckeyes have a proven quality center. Josh Simmons, a very good tackle, top 3-round pick at least. I think he could work his way up into a really high 2nd-round pick. Donovan Jackson, very solid player, definitely a draft pick. Josh Breyer at right tackle got a kind of a bad rap last year. I think he's pretty darn good. Hinsman and Tegra, whoever plays right guard. It's a solid line. I think the Buckeyes have a solid line. It's not a great line. It's got a lot of room for improvement, and it just might be improved. But Oregon has the nod here for sure. And I think there's a decent sized gap based on what we know of these two lines right now. And we'll do this again when we get closer. Terrence Ferguson at tight end for the Ducks, 42 receptions last year, 6 touchdowns. Definitely better than what the Buckeyes have on paper as of yet, and what we've known of what's happened in spring. It's not been great at tight end for the Bucks, but again, that could improve. We're not giving the tight ends their own separate category. You can throw them in with the linemen or the receivers. Either way, it doesn't change. It doesn't, the Ducks already win the linemen, and you throw them in with the receiver, and it's not boosting the Ducks wide receivers over the Buckeyes. So Ohio State wins running back and wide receiver with a big gap at running back and a smaller gap at wide receiver. But Oregon wins the 2 priority spots of the offensive line and the quarterback. So on paper, to me, the Ducks have the better offense. However, they don't have Chip Kelly. So, really, really close. If Chip Kelly can do what we think he can do with this offense. Ohio State makes up slightly losing the offensive battle by winning all 3 levels of the defense. And we'll just cut straight to it here. The Buckeyes defense is excellent. And when you break it down group by group, Jordan Birch and Ashton Porter, defensive ends for Oregon, quality players. They got some good big bodies in the middle. We don't need to spend a whole lot of time on the defensive line. The Duck unit loses. Jack and JT at end with Kenyatta, Mitchell Melton, Caden Curry, maybe a little Edric Houston, Ty Hamilton and Caden at the 1, Tyleek Jason Moore at the 3. It's a landslide between the Buckeyes and anybody else in the country because of how deep they are with ready-to-play guys. And that's what happens when you get a ton of seniors coming back. You've got guys that are ready to play that otherwise would have been starting, and they're waiting their turn. And that's why I just absolutely love this defense. It's not just the talent. It's not just the depth of the talent, but it's how ready to play the depth is. They're ready to go. They're guys that would have normally been starting this year. So Oregon's really good on the defensive line. The Buckeyes are the best in the country, in my mind. Buckeyes get the win. Now, linebackers, Justin Jacobs and Jeffrey Bassa, they're proven good linebackers for Oregon. For Ohio State, veteran Cody Simon, I think we know his floor, and we've seen flashes of a pretty high ceiling. Very good athlete, I think an underrated athlete, quarterback of the defense, and I feel very comfortable about that. He's a great leader. He's a smart dude, cerebral dude. Very happy that he's going to be the guy with the green dot on his helmet. Sonny Styles and CJ Hicks, that combo, and, it just may end up being that neither of these guys really win the dominant starting role, and we see a ton of both of them. And I kind of hope that's what happens. But despite the lack of experience, we know these dudes are two of the freakiest defenders in college football. We know Sonny's an incredibly hard worker, just one of 3 guys that got the Golden Buckeye on the team, and an incredibly smart player. And CJ Hicks, he's coming around. So because of that, playing those two inexperienced, well, Sonny's not inexperienced anymore, but inexperienced at linebacker, but playing them next to Cody Simon, who's an incredible leader, I just can't ignore the talent of those two dudes, whichever one it is that's on the field, playing next to Cody. Even though there's inexperience, I have to give the nod to the Buckeyes at linebacker. However, much closer on paper at this point, another one where I don't think it'll be that close come game time. And I don't think it'll be that close come game time because of the crazy unit they have in front of them and the crazy unit they have behind them, which includes, as we move to the secondary, Denzel Ward, IGB, with Jermaine Matthews. I mean, these are first-round cornerbacks, I think, all 3 of them, with nasty attitudes that are competitive as heck. Top 10 nickel in the country in Jordan Hancock, without a doubt the top 2 safety in the country in Caleb Downs, if you add in Malachi Starks at Georgia. But I think most people would lean with Caleb. Lathan Ransom, I mean, on the Oregon side, you got a true number 1 corner in Jabbar Muhammad. No doubt about it. Some other solid players. But again, this one, not too incredibly close. Buckeyes win this. So Ohio State wins all 3 levels of the defense. And only one that's kind of close to me, and that's linebacker. And again, Ohio State has the athletic ability to make that one not very close too, when you sandwich it in the middle of those 2 great groups. So, the Buckeye defense is so legit. And every time I do this and look at somebody else who's on the Buckeyes level, and we're going to do this again with Georgia, and we will do it again with Texas, and we'll do it again with Alabama. Why not? We'll keep rolling. We'll do it with Michigan, and I will be incredibly unbiased and biased at the same time. But look, here's the thing, though. I'm trying to be unbiased here. This defense is crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, if you disagree with me, any of you Duck fans too, and I understand, yes, obviously we're all more familiar with our people's roster, right? Like when I talk about a guy like Mitchell Melton, right? Okay. Obviously, I don't know the Mitchell Melton on your team. You don't know the Mitchell Melton on our team. I just can't possibly imagine that your Mitchell Melton is our Mitchell Melton, and I think that our Mitchell Melton could start for your team. Is that biased? I don't know, man. I don't know if it is or isn't. But I do know, after doing this, I feel quite a bit better about this matchup, I'll tell you that. So when we wrap it all up, we have the Ducks winning quarterback and offensive line. The Buckeyes win wide receiver, running back, defensive line, linebacker, secondary offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and head coach. But a lot of these groups are very close. So it doesn't mean just because they get a small edge here and there that it's a definitive advantage, because a lot of them are very close. And Oregon's gap at quarterback and offensive line might be quite wide. The thing about both these teams is neither of them have a group that would be considered weak on a national level. They're all solid across the board, all these groups, with the biggest question mark of any of them being the Buckeyes' offensive line. Now, my personal opinion is we're not going to have near the problems that we otherwise would have had we not gotten Chip Kelly. I think Chip Kelly, as we talked about Oregon, the dude schemed them to heights they've never been to. He can scheme his way away from issues and into the strengths of the offense, which also kind of negates that quarterback situation, or the gap, a little bit too. I just can't wait to see this. I just can't wait. I cannot believe how much longer we have to wait for this. And it's like once we get a taste of this and we finally can just be like, aha, okay, now I see what they're going to do. Now we see where this is going. Now we see what direction we're going in. But from now to then, the speculation is it's just off the charts. And, it makes it so much longer. It's so long. Oh. A couple of weeks ago, Steve Wiltfong came out and said that Bo Jackson, stud Ohio running back, a guy that just as few as maybe 5 years ago would have been Ohio State locked up already almost, right? Usually, in most cases. Taking visits to Alabama and Georgia, Wiltfong came out and said, at a time when we all thought this was very much trending Ohio State and almost, a done-ish deal, even though we knew he was taking those visits, Wiltfong comes out and says that Bo Jackson, he thought Georgia was in the lead. Steve Wiltfong, one of the most respected recruiting guys for a very long time, recently was at 24/7. He had been there for a while, took a promotion to move on to On3. So now he's very much invested in On3. And On3, the newest of the services with a ton of financial backing, they're expanding fast. They're improving fast. From the time I started this show, just 4 months ago now, they've gotten a lot better. They got a ton of scouts, a whole lot of financial investment. Between them and 247, as far as financial investment, they blow ESPN and Rivals away. They encompass every angle of scouting, recruiting, reporting, and there's still a lot of inconsistencies in their rankings, but it's getting better and better and better. I'm constantly checking up on that kind of stuff, and I just noticed the improvements all the time with them. And I think at some point, they're going to be the best of the best. I really do. It's not there yet, though. But over the weekend, Steve Wiltfong weighed in on 4 recruits. Now, those recruits were Justin Hill, Dorian Brew, Naeem Offord, and some other kid he's committed to SMU. The reason he's committed to SMU is an interesting reason, which maybe we'll talk about that in a second. Now, Dorian Brew, obviously a guy who's from Ohio, moved down to Conroe, Texas when his dad started coaching at Conroe, Texas, or maybe he was coaching at Conroe, Texas before that. I'm not sure of that. But his dad's coaching at Conroe, Texas, and he moved down there recently. His mom in the Ohio State Athletics Hall of Fame. And it was trending good for him early on. And then it kind of felt like after the commitments of Naeem Offord and Devin Sanchez that it was just going the wrong way. Also, he's probably going to play safety in college. And it felt like at that time, Trey McNutt and Fahim Delane were both also trending big to the Buckeyes. Now, with Blake Woodby decommitting, things not looking so good with Fahim Delane, with Trey McNutt, there was a thought that maybe things might be looking better with Dorian Brew, combined with the fact that he did an interview with Mark Givler of Buckeye Huddle, and the way he talked sounded like a guy who really, really likes Ohio State and misses Ohio. So, Wiltfong reported on him first and said that everything he's hearing is it's Texas, LSU, and USC with a ton of momentum. I don't even think there was a mention of Ohio State in there. Then he goes to Justin Hill. The guy says, that's interviewing him, says something about an Ohio State lean, and he says, I wouldn't call him an Ohio State lean. I get the sense that Alabama is very well positioned going on as well. Then he gets to Justin Hill and he says, I wouldn't call him an Ohio State lean. I get the sense that Alabama is well positioned moving forward as they get an official visit. And Oregon is a big threat to Alabama. He just loves the vibe in Tuscaloosa, being on campus, likes the new staff at Alabama. But Oregon, they're going to give Ohio State hell on the trail. If not, maybe in front of Ohio State going into these official visits. Then he gets to Naeem Offord. Anytime you have a blue chip recruit out of your area down in SEC country, and he's taking official visits, you got to be concerned, especially when it's Oregon, and he's taking an official. Then he brought up DeCorian Moore's mom and said that DeCorian Moore's mom told him, talking about Dan Lanning and staff, that nobody does it better from a relationship process than Oregon. About Offord, he also said Florida State and Auburn are going to be in the mix. Ohio State has the recruiting chops to hold him, but they don't bat 1,000. So he's either telling the absolute truth here, and all of these things are trending down for the Buckeyes, and there's no embellishment at all. Or when you talk about big-time prospects, the more uncertainty you create, the more attention you get from all the big-time fan bases who are in on that recruit. It's possible that every single one of these guys was at one point feeling really good for the Buckeyes and is trending backwards. But I don't know, man. I don't know. You combine this with the fact that he's at On3, maybe this is a conspiracy. He just moved jobs. They're really trying to pump up their business and their attention and overtake 24/7 and generate interest. We've always known that if you create more uncertainty about a prospect, you get both fan bases or every fan base that's in on that prospect more involved. I just find it hard to believe that all of a sudden all these guys who were really, really, solid with Ohio State are all trending the wrong way. And maybe a little bit of it is fear that I'm trying to make up an excuse, but it just doesn't seem right to me. It just does not. On Friday, I ran across EA Sports tiers. So EA Sports, not just paying the players, but they're paying the schools, and they're paying them based on a tier basis. So let me pull up these tiers here. Let's go over this, because when I first saw this, I was like, what in the hell is going on here? So tier 1, as you can see here, we've got Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan. Okay, that looks like tier 1. Clemson, Notre Dame, Oregon. Okay, Georgia. All right. LSU, yeah. Oregon. Okay. Oklahoma State, Utah, Iowa. What? And if you look at tier 2, USC, Texas, and Florida State are down there under Utah and Iowa. Then I read the fine print, and they have based this off of top 10 rankings or top 25 rankings in the last 10 years. And if you look here, it shows us a graph of the last 10 years and the amount of times these schools finished in the top 10. And that's how they came up with tier 1. Incredibly impressive. Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State. Biggest surprise there. I would not have guessed that those guys finished 6 times in the top 10 in the last decade. Somehow they always seem to fly under the radar. And props to Iowa. That's pretty doggone impressive. So now that we know the criteria, let's talk about a couple other surprises here. Obviously, we know Texas and USC in there received 1 point for every top 25 finish. Every year they finish in the top 25. As we go down to the final tier, this is really upsetting. You got all the smaller schools, right? And it also includes an embarrassing 5 Big Ten teams: Illinois, Nebraska, Rutgers, Maryland, and Purdue. Hanging out there in tier 4 with schools like Hawaii, Rice, I mean, come on, dude. UTSA, just unbelievable. 5 Big Ten teams. The SEC has one in Vanderbilt. That's just embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing. I'm trying to watch fun regular season games, and they got to do better. EA Sports welcomed a pile of journalists to wherever their headquarters is to come play that game. So we're going to get some reports about the gameplay here coming out soon. They're not allowed to release it just yet. Penn State, just want to reiterate, I am irritated still that we did not protect the Penn State game, but they are doing a $700 million renovation to the stadium. I think the exterior looks different. I don't know. Like right now, it looks really weird. It's like I'll put another picture up there of what it looks like now. A lot of folks call it an erector set, and it does look really like just piecemeal together with beams everywhere. So they're trying to get rid of that look. They are also improving circulation to alleviate congestion, concourse expansion, improved press box, new restrooms, increased 50%. We could sure use that at the shoe. Upgraded concession stands, 102 new points of sale, new premium seating because everybody wants that, improved field lighting, and a new video board. I've wondered often, what is going to happen? In what direction are we going to go when all these old historical college stadiums at some point are beyond disrepair? What happens then? And it's really going to suck, man, because if they start building like cookie cutter NFL crap stadiums, they're not going to have the same kind of money the NFL does to build these really unique, cool places. It's just not going to be like that, I don't think. Penn State was talking about potentially building a new stadium instead of enhancing Beaver Stadium. And they were talking about the money to build a 100,000 seat stadium. And it just was something that was going to cost them way too much, like $2 billion or something. Obviously, they had nowhere near that. So it's going to be a very sad day. I kind of hope it doesn't happen in my lifetime. And, luckily, I guess I don't think it will, right? What do I got? I'm 45. I got, 40 more years tops. Yeah, the shoe can last. The shoe can last. All right. Also, Penn State. So you probably heard about what's going on with the doctor and the allegations. I just wanted to kind of run through, if you hadn't. So Dr. Scott Lynch was at one time Penn State's director of athletic medicine. He is also a former national championship wrestler at Penn State, and he was fired by Penn State in 2019. He says he was fired because he refused to allow the coach to interfere with his medical treatment and return to play decisions. Penn State says he was fired because he was driving 100 miles into work every day from Hershey, Pennsylvania, and they wanted someone who lived in State College. When he first brought on this lawsuit, his lawyers tried to name Franklin as one of the defendants, but the statute of limitations had run out and he couldn't. So instead, the lawsuit is directed at Penn State Medical Center, Dr. Kevin Black, who gave his dismissal. This is the second trial. The first one ended in a mistrial, and they're currently in the second one. And a former colleague of his, Dr. Pete Seiderberg, took the stand this week, also with Dr. Lynch. Now, from Lynch, a couple of his statements that Franklin made. He made a rule that if injured players missed medical treatment for injuries, then they had to be full go at practice. Dr. Lynch pleaded with Franklin to change this form of punishment, suggesting that he have the players who missed treatments clean up the locker room instead. Lynch also said to James Franklin, just because they don't show up to treatment doesn't mean they're not injured. Apparently, this didn't go over well with Franklin. So Dr. Lynch said to him, I didn't mean any disrespect, and Franklin never responded back to him. He also testified that we probably didn't understand each other, and he was never sure when Franklin was being sarcastic. To attempt to fix things, Lynch sent an email saying that he wanted to sit down with him over drinks and talk about family. He never got a response. Lynch says he wasn't accepting any of my recommendations about care of the players. And that Franklin and the head athletic trainer told him, and that Franklin told him and the head athletic trainer never to use the term lateral meniscus when talking to players about serious injuries. Dr. Lynch responded to Franklin that he was not going to lie to injured players. That was on a phone call. The phone call immediately disconnected. Lynch testified that he believed Franklin hung up, so he called back and was told that the coach had left the office. Lynch says they were suggesting that I should not disclose a patient's diagnosis, and that's pretty abhorrent to me. He also said that Franklin would get angry when certain players were not cleared for practice or games. Franklin did not like the number of players on the injury report. He also alleges that Franklin cracked down on spatting players' ankles. If you spat a player's ankles, you can't see the Nike logo, right? And that doesn't make Nike happy. So this dude's alleging that because Franklin wanted the Nike logo visible, he was telling them not to spat their ankles. So all of those are pretty wild allegations to me. But the one that caught all the headlines this week was it's the one that sounds the most dramatic. But this is the one I'm not quite so sure if it's just not the headline that sounds so dramatic or if it's actually, let's just go over it. So a player apparently attempted suicide, a player on a football scholarship. And Franklin wanted this player to be medically disqualified from the team while he was receiving short-term psychiatric care. All right, so Seiderberg came on and then gave his testimony, and this one is the one that caught all the headlines from this. So apparently this guy testified that Franklin and then athletic director Sandy Barber wanted a player who attempted suicide to be medically disqualified from the team while he was receiving treatment in short-term psychiatric care. If the player was medically disqualified, it would have caused him to lose his athletic scholarship. Now, as I understand this, he still would have had his scholarship and still would have been able to go to school, wasn't getting kicked out of school, didn't have to pay for school. That was all fine. But the team would have that scholarship number back to offer to somebody else. Seiderberg testified this is one of several instances that James Franklin tried to do something like this. The school alleges the doctor, who lived 100 miles away in Hershey, Pennsylvania, did not have clearance to be the lead operator at the hospital in Penn State. So when he had to do surgeries or when he had to do procedures with players, he was having them travel to Hershey, Pennsylvania so that he could be the lead in those surgeries. They did not like that. They also did not like that he was not as present as they would have liked him to be. So that's why they're saying they got rid of him. And he's alleging all these things here. Now, this doesn't sound too good. I don't think anything's going to come of this in regards to James Franklin's job, and he's not on the hook personally. But I did hear some Penn State, I don't know, I think it's a Penn State reporter talk about this. And the attitude around Penn State is that these guys, both of these doctors, have been trying to get money with this whole thing for a while, and that there's not a whole lot to it. I don't know, but that's what they said. I take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, they're connected to Penn State. But some of that stuff, you imagine probably goes on a lot of places. All right, we're going to go over some recruiting stuff and some prospects, but before we do, my Miami ACC pick My Miami ACC championship pick obviously got a lot of people scoffing and laughing. And of course, I knew that would be the case, right? It sounds crazy on its surface. It's Miami. They were 6-6 last year. Couple of things here, though. One of the most fun things about having a show now is I get to put myself on record. And there's going to be an answer. So we can talk about it as the season goes on. If I'm right, I will let you know. If I'm wrong, I will clown myself and we can do it together. One of the things that I can't stand when I'm watching a show is when someone constantly reminds me of how often they're right and conveniently forgets every time they're wrong. You will not get that out of me. So I can't stand the fact that I think Miami's going to be good this year. Nobody hates Miami and their clown show, garbage fans, empty stadium, and everything that goes along with them more than me. Trust me. I've got flags and memorabilia all over this place, and there is not a single thing from Miami or Michigan, because these are probably the two schools I hate most. Like Miami is just, I hate them. They make my skin crawl. I hate everything about them. So it doesn't give me any pleasure to say that, but football's hard to predict, and I think it's fun to try. I've been told several times that I put too much value into recruiting rankings, but the truth is I don't put too much value into recruiting rankings. The national champion puts too much value into recruiting rankings, so take it up with them. There is one glaring outlier in the college football playoff era. There is one glaring outlier in the college football playoff era when it comes to talent. Clemson was the one at number 9. Michigan, obviously, way out there at number 14. But if you want to win a national championship, you simply have to meet a certain criteria of talent in the recruiting rankings. It's been proven time and time again. So, yes, I absolutely care about recruiting rankings, and that's why it's one of the biggest boxes you need to check to be able to reach the next step when you're a program that's trying to climb and get better. So when we see teams who don't generally recruit in that air, right? Teams that don't generally recruit at that level get multiple recruiting classes up there at the top. I think it's fair to say that they are checking off that big box. It's a huge criteria. But now we have a new way to get good fast, to improve a team that's building through recruiting fast. And I think it's taken some people longer to adjust to this new reality, specifically as it comes to Miami and Oregon. A team can turn its roster around in rapid time now. And yes, Miami has been recruiting fantastically, but that's not why I think they're going to win the ACC. A couple of those guys from last year's class and the year before's class, and they've been excellent classes, they're going to help. But it's the excellent portal additions that I'm talking about. Guys that I've watched play college football that can play at a very high level, who used to play on other teams. Are they going to win a national championship? No. Does it matter what the previous coach did or what the last 20 years were at Miami? No, that's irrelevant to me this year. I could care less what their record was the last 5 years. Mario Cristobal's been there. This is now his 3rd year. It doesn't even really matter what last year's record was because 50% of the roster is now upgraded. I just want to ask some of you guys, like, what do you think matters in November? The talent on the field or what happened in the last 20 years? And I get a lot of pushback when I talk about Oregon too. They've never won a national championship. No. Does that matter when they're on the field in November? Playing in a game in November? Is it the talent on the field and the coaching on the sidelines? Or is it the history of the program? The history of the program can help you acquire the talent. It can help you get a lot of things, but it doesn't help you win on the field. The transfer portal and the ability to purchase free agent players has drastically changed this equation. Like comparing Miami's roster last year to Florida State or Clemson, there was a noticeable gap. There is no longer a gap. And I think it's the best roster of those three. But even if you don't think it's the best, it's definitely up for debate. But talking about last year's 6-6 record, I just want to let you know their win total this year with Las Vegas is 9.5. You win 10 games, you're in the playoffs. I went back several years. Almost every time you're in the playoffs with 10 wins. The guys that make the win total stand to lose a lot of money if they're way off. So it's really not going that far out on a limb to say what I'm saying. All right, let's go through some commit news. Jamie French, wide receiver from Mandarin, Florida, was a big Buckeye lean. That's all we heard. And then he comes out with his top 3 schools. Buckeyes aren't on there. Took us all by surprise. Almost seemed like a joke. Another crystal ball is just rolled for him to Texas. And Texas now seems really confident that they're going to get him. And they also think they're going to get Decorian Moore and the number 2 wide receiver by most people, well, by a lot of people's eyes, Khalil Lockett. I would actually take Khalil Lockett over Decorian Moore. And I actually don't think Jamie French is that dynamic. And I think in most classes, he's not a 5-star. So my heart's not breaking if we don't get Jamie French. My heart wouldn't break at all if Brian Hartline was all the way out on Jamie French for the way he's acted here. I think it sends up red flags everywhere. And, this wide receiver class is strange in that there's not really a lot of guys at the top that are much different from the guys that are 8 to 12. It just seems like a whole lot of quite good wide receivers. Quincy Porter is a guy who the Buckeyes are in on. Michigan's in on good. And he's a bigger body wide receiver that I really like. We've watched him here on the show. He's out of Bergen, New Jersey, Bergen Catholic. I think I might choose him over Jamie French if I was just, picking between the two. And, he's down like 12th or something. And there's a lot of other guys in this crop. Dalen McCutcheon out of Lovejoy, Texas. Really loved him when we watched his film here on the show. That is Peyton Pierce's school. I really like Talon Taylor. Talon Taylor has us in his final 3. The interesting thing is about wide receivers. So I was looking at all the Buckeye offers, and I looked through, say, like tight end. We offered 8 tight ends. 7 of them are committed. 4 quarterbacks, all 4 of them are committed. Maybe let's just say a dozen running backs, and 75% of those running backs are committed. 20 wide receivers, and I think like 3 out of those 20 are committed. And there's a theory going on that the Buckeyes are in the pole position here, and all the wide receivers are kind of waiting to see who commits to Ohio State. I think in many years that might be true. I'm not quite so sure I see that this year. And I think that really is so weird how diva-like wide receivers are. Like, they really are, man. It's so funny. The attention that they want, and that Brian Smith theory about all these top-rated guys that he thinks are going to be waiting till real close to signing day. Would it surprise you if it was a bunch of wide receivers that pulled that? It wouldn't surprise me. But there's a whole lot of guys in this class that I think are just, good wide receivers. I don't think it's an incredibly great class, but it's deep with very high quality guys that have been playing wide receiver for a long time, that are very polished. And there's just, they're all very close here. So I don't think we're going to go wrong, no matter what 3-pack of guys Heartline gets to go on top of Desi, Des Jones is fantastic. He's going to be an excellent slot receiver. He's rated way down there. Like, these guys and these wide receivers just keep getting more and more polished every year. And it almost just comes down to coaching. You get your couple at the top that are just excellent. This year, I don't think the guys at the very top are that outstanding. You look at a guy like DeCorian Moore, I don't think he'd be a number 1 in a lot of classes. Jamie French, I don't think he'd be a 5-star in a lot of classes. So, whatever way this goes, I think the Bucs will be fine. But I'd sure like to see a little momentum, just because I feel like we haven't had any going any way positive in a long time. It's just been a little bit. The only positive thing that we've seen that's really made me happy recently is Andrew Stargell, lineman from Georgia, and Isaiah West, once he decommitted from Kentucky. And I feel like he's a big Buckeye lean. And the more I've watched this guy, like, I am so in on Isaiah West that I would not be surprised one lick if the Buckeyes ended up getting Jordan Davison and Isaiah West, and Isaiah West was the one in year 2 who was carrying the load with James Peoples and not Jordan Davison. Like, I think this dude is so legit. So incredibly excited for him. And I do think that he's going to be in the class, and I do think it's going to be relatively soon. Buckeye edge commit Zahir Mathis, top 100 edge rusher, top 100 overall edge rusher. Been in the news recently. The 6'6", 225-pounder said he's still being pursued heavily by Penn State and Georgia. He has not officially closed his recruitment, and some visits are in the making, though he's not sure yet where. He cannot graduate early because of his high school rules, so his official visit won't be till during the season. He said he's in contact with Larry every day. Trey Denodum, stud defensive tackle from North Carolina. He was at Oregon last week for their thing up at Oregon, and we had heard from the Oregon guys that they thought it was down to Oregon and USC. Well, he was just at Ohio State. Larry Johnson was down visiting him a few weeks ago in North Carolina. And Trajan really seemed to have a good visit. And now he's got an official scheduled at Ohio State here just in a couple more weeks. His officials are UCLA, Ohio State, Oregon, and USC. And he said he's considering adding one more, Georgia, Auburn, or Penn State. He wants to be committed before the season. That's fantastic. I think as far as the big guys in the middle go, he's number 2 on Larry Johnson's wish list behind Malik Autry. Just my opinion there, though. A few weeks ago, we talked about Coach Loock taking his trip to Mississippi, and he was meeting 2 main guys. Well, I mean, he was there to meet one guy, and that was a running back, but he also met with Mario Nash. Mario Nash is a 6'4", 270, top 300 lineman, and that was during the kind of course correction where they were offering a whole lot of linemen. So what does Mario Nash think of Justin Fry, who he was supposed to be in town to meet this weekend? The visit didn't happen. Mario Nash could not make it up. That visit is not rescheduled. And Mario Nash told me that he has yet to meet Justin Fry. So we don't know what he thinks of him yet. But he really likes Ohio State. He loves the tradition. He loves the trenches. And he loves the players that get drafted from the trenches. So he's high on Ohio State, hasn't met Fry yet, and trying to reschedule that visit, but he doesn't know when yet. But the reason Coach Locke was down there was to offer running back Demarius Yates, 6 foot, 185-pound, composite top 50, number 4 running back in the country, state champion in the 200 meters, and it shows. This dude flies. Smooth in the open field, shifty in small spaces. Got a nice knack to turn a 20-yard run into a 40-yard touchdown. Let's watch a few plays. Yeah, that dude's sick. Madden Feriamo, linebacker who just looks like a Notre Dame linebacker to me, but I could just be thinking that because he kind of reminds me of Manti Te'o. Anyway, Washington will get his first official visit, then Notre Dame, then Ohio State, then Texas. I don't think we're going to get this guy, and I think he would just be gravy on top of the class anyway. But, you know, he's coming for an official visit. 24/7 did some updated rankings. And some good news for a couple Buckeyes. Tavian St. Clair, we've discussed for a little while the chance that he might be able to be the number 1 overall player in the class by the time it's up. Well, Tavian St. Clair in the new rankings has moved to number 2. And that is really cool watching this dude go from relative unknown, small town Ohio. Buckeyes find him. And then you just see the ball start rolling. And all of a sudden, this dude is now the number 2 quarterback in the country, headed to the Elite 11, just behind Bryce Underwood for that number 1 spot. Bryce Underwood out of Michigan, LSU commit. There has been some noise after DeCorian Moore's decommitment from LSU that he may decommit also. I haven't heard anything else on that, but there was some kerfuffle about it. But really good, obviously. And the thought was that Bryce Underwood and Tavian St. Clair would be battling this number 1 slot out at the Elite 11. But Bryce Underwood is not going to be going to the Elite 11. And one can only imagine he's probably scared of Tavian St. Clair, and who wouldn't be? So looks like that battle will take place during the season for that number 1 overall spot. Ohio State's second highest commit, an absolute delight of a commit, Devin Sanchez. If they could only all be like Devin, also moved up to number 4 in the country, giving the Buckeyes the number 2, 4, and 6 prospect in the country with Naeem Offord at 6. And a funny Naeem Offord tidbit later on in the show involving. That's incredibly impressive. Carter Lowe moves up from, I think, 34 to number 33, one spot outside of 5-star range. Malik Autry with a big jump up to 29. So Malik Autry is now a 5-star. That is the defensive tackle from Alabama that's an Auburn commit who, along with Ziggy Grady, is interested in the Bucks. And gosh, that one would be just fantastic. That would be so nice to be able to get just a big monster 5-star defensive tackle, the guy we thought we had in Justin Scott. Other Buckeye commits checking in. Tarvis Alford at number 72, Zahir Mathis, 132, London Merritt, 135. Interesting that those two are so close. Nate Roberts, 175, and Des Jones, number 225. That's a travesty. That's a travesty. Take a look at this Des Jones video. I mean, come on now, man. That dude is ridiculous. That is a smooth operator right there, and a hardworking dude too. Vernell Brown with a massive move from like the 170 range overall up to number 38. So Vernell Brown is trending towards 5-star. We'll see, man. I mean, he's not too far off now. And again, another one we were told was trending very poorly. But after we were told that by the national guys, Berm came out and said he still feels quite confident about Vernell Brown. So if Vernell Brown is in this class still, if we can get him, Quincy Porter, yeah, dude. Taylon Taylor or Dalen McCutcheon, that's a sick class. Adding on to Desi Jones, that's a sick class, dude. It really is. Jamie French is not necessary in this class, I guess. That's my opinion on that. So I'm just saying, like, this class could still be very, very sweet without DeCorian Moore and without Jamie French, for sure. But, you know, Khalil Lockett actually would be number 1 on my wish list anyway. Justin Hill made a huge jump from 157 to 60. And we've seen the momentum in his recruiting pickup. Like Justin Hill, as much as we've been talking about how bad we want him in this class, it's starting to be like that, you know, nationally. Everybody's saying that it's in on him. Like they want him. He's being like prioritized big time by Oregon and Alabama. Look ahead lines. So Notre Dame, like I said earlier, Texas A&M. Notre Dame is the dog in that game. I'm not quite understanding how that is. LSU and USC. LSU is -6 to USC. Georgia, a 2-touchdown favorite over Clemson. When Alabama travels up to Wisconsin, I think that's week 3. Alabama is an 8-point favorite. And Texas is a 3.5-point favorite at Michigan. So Michigan will host Texas as a 3.5-point underdog. I think that's low. I think that's a low line. I don't know. Foundation. So as far as House versus NCAA, there was I saw a lot of just a lot of confusion with the verbiage in the release. This is not going to be overseen by a government entity. The conferences are coming together and creating their own enforcement agency, very similar to this. At the start of the 20th century, mass formations of gang tackling gave football a reputation as a brutal sport. During the 1904 season alone, there were 18 deaths and 159 serious injuries on the field. Hired players and not enrolled students often filled out rosters, and some colleges halted football on their campuses entirely. The public outcry grew, and in October 1905, President Teddy Roosevelt, a longtime football fan, stud, called together athletic leaders from Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and urged them to clean up the game. As football deaths and injuries continued to mount during the 1905 season, New York University Chancellor Henry M. McCracken convened a meeting of 13 schools in December to reform football playing rules, and soon after, the Intercollegiate Athletic Association of the United States, a precursor to the NCAA, was formed. So, all those schools come together, form the NCAA, and make up the rules, and then they give the NCAA, a third party, the power to enforce those rules. That is exactly what's going to happen here with this enforcement arm that's going to enforce how this new payment structure is doled out properly. All right, so when Ryan Day hired Carlos Loughlin out from under Dan Lanning went and hired Rashad Samples. Rashad Samples was coaching wide receivers or running backs at Arizona State. Rashad Samples' dad is DeCorian Moore's coach in high school at Duncanville. I just heard that the other day. I don't know how I missed that, but that's pretty wild. That is pretty wild. Now, Rashad Samples, no chump, definitely an up-and-coming coach, but he's young. Started off his career with Tom Herman, Houston, then Texas. Then he was at SMU. And there's a big connection between the Duncanville head coach, his dad, and SMU, which is why his quarterback at Duncanville is committed to SMU, but may end up flipping to Alabama, who is the other guy that Wilt Fong was talking about in that 4-pack that we talked about earlier. All right, guys. Well, that'll do me for today. Appreciate you guys. Please like the show if you haven't already. And hopefully next week we can have a little higher energy because I won't be shooting so late at night. And I apologize for that. But we had a busy weekend, and I definitely hope to get some good stuff going on next week with some good stories. And I think I've got a really good guest coming on tomorrow that I can't wait to share with you guys. So I will talk to you guys soon. Juck and Bucks out.